A simple woman walked into a boxing gym with a mop and no gloves, and just 14 minutes later, she knocked out the gym star fighter with one punch in front of everyone. What they didn't know: she used to be a champion. What happened in between will change the way you see silence, power, and judgment forever. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. And if you believe in stories that honor quiet strength, don't forget to follow for more. It was just an ordinary Friday morning, the kind that slid into the calendar with no noise and no promise. The gym lights blinked awake at 6 a.m. sharp, humming low like they always did when the breakers were flipped. Machines breathed back to life, pulleys squeaked with dust, and the digital display above the mirror wall lit up with a glowing "Welcome to Cliffside." Nothing seemed different. Nothing ever did. Not at that hour. The woman, nobody really remembered when she first started showing up, arrived as usual. Gray janitor's shirt, navy work pants, mop bucket that clicked every third roll. Her name badge swung from a belt loop, clipped low, first name only. She pushed the cart without sound, except for the occasional squeak of old rubber wheels across the polished tile. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s. Hair tied back under a faded cap. Flat shoes with cracked sides. Nothing about her invited attention. And no one gave it. She passed the vending fridge, the smoothie counter, the treadmill bay, the racks of protein bars and flashy branded towels. She didn't look at the posters plastered to the locker room doors, smiling athletes with captions like "Push past the pain" and "Train like a legend." She didn't need the reminder. She walked past it all with the same rhythm she used every day. Unseen. Unacknowledged. Until she got too close to the ring. It wasn't even deliberate. A spill of pre-workout powder had crusted along the bench press rail, and she leaned in with her towel to clean it. Her foot shifted half a step, edging toward the canvas. That was all it took. A voice cut through the morning haze like a whip. "Yo, janitor's getting brave today." The words came from Eli Grant, shirtless, gloves half-laced, ego fully loaded. He was a regular weekend warrior, 6 amateur wins under his belt, and a mouth that always moved faster than his fists. He was warming up by the ring, shadowboxing with himself, and smirking like the air owed him applause. "Careful, sweetheart," he added, stretching one glove toward her. "Step in there, and the mop's gonna have to fight for you." A few of the gymgoers chuckled. The fitness girls near the water cooler looked up from their phones. One raised hers, subtle tilt, camera open. Not hidden. Not shy. Another trainer glanced over, but said nothing. Just leaned against the front desk, chewing on a protein bar. The woman didn't respond. She just wrung out the towel and kept cleaning. The chalk marks on the edge of the mat came off with effort. Her strokes were tight, controlled. A few more laughs echoed across the gym. "Maybe she thinks she's part of the program," someone joked by the dumbbells. "Cliffside's janitor fitness circuit. Wipe the sweat, then earn the bruises. Mop your way to muscle," another voice chimed in. Phones tilted. A few more hands reached into pockets, clicked into camera mode. Still, she didn't answer. She rinsed the towel once, set it back on the cart, then lifted the mop. The silence that followed wasn't respect. It was anticipation. "Guess that's a yes," a trainer said, raising an eyebrow. Someone called out, "She gonna mop the ring or fight in it?" A junior coach named Brandon, all biceps and bounce, laughed from across the room. "Hey, relax, Eli. Let her finish disinfecting your ego." A few more laughs. Then Eli raised both gloves, spreading his arms wide like a stage actor. "Come on," he shouted, "one round. I promise not to bleed on her shoes." Nobody stopped him. Nobody stepped in. The gym, as it often was, became its own echo chamber of performance and pride. And slowly, what began as a joke turned into a crowd. The camera phones multiplied. The jokes turned meaner. The eyes turned sharper. Still, she said nothing. Not when they offered her gloves. Not when they added her name to the whiteboard with dry marker. 12:20, Eli versus Mop. Not when Brandon laughed and waved someone to get the old sparring gloves from the storage cage. Not when the ring was cleared. She stood by her cart, watching. Then she walked back, slow and steady, and reached beneath the towel bin. Her gloves were tucked deep in the side pocket, old, weather-worn, leather softened and cracked by time and use. She carried them in one hand, like she didn't need to prove anything. And maybe she didn't. But she stepped toward the ring anyway. "Oh, she's serious," someone muttered near the rowing machines. "This is gonna be brutal." Eli bounced in place, neck rolling, eyes gleaming. "I'll go easy," he said again. "Can't have her quitting halfway through. That floor won't mop itself." She didn't flinch. Didn't smile. She knelt by the edge of the ring and began wrapping her hands, slow, practiced, precise. It was almost reverent. Like a ceremony. The gym didn't notice the details. The way she taped her wrists in clean, fluid loops. The way her breathing stayed even. The way her eyes never wandered. They saw the badge, not the hands. They saw the mop, not the muscle memory. $10 says she bails before the bell, someone whispered. 15 says she gets KO'd in under 20 seconds. Eli laughed with his crew, stretching his shoulders. Try not to hit her too hard, champ, one said. Might lose your gym discount. And yet, there was something in the air. Subtle. A shift. One of the clipboard trainers near the back paused mid-sentence, staring toward the ring. His gaze narrowed. He tilted his head like he recognized something in her posture. That stance, he murmured. But no one listened. The crowd was ready. Phones high. Grins wide. And she silent. Ready. Waiting. You ever wonder how many champions walk among us dressed in uniforms we ignore? How many masters we dismiss because they don't wear the right shoes or speak the right way, or come in with a mop instead of music? Tell me, if someone walked into your space today and stood quiet while you judged them out loud, would you even realize what you were really seeing? Or would you, like Eli, grin for the crowd until the crowd turned quiet? She had never planned to step into the ring again. Not after what happened 3 years ago, when the lights dimmed on her last official bout and the referee raised someone else's arm. Not after the crowd went home without clapping and the sponsors vanished like they had never shaken her hand. She told herself she was done. Not because she had lost, but because she had lost the reason. She used to fight for something, her brother's medical bills, her mother's rent, the promise she once made to a dying coach who saw something in her when she had nothing. But then everything got paid off. Everyone who needed her no longer did. She was left with bruised knuckles and nowhere to land them. So she faded, not in bitterness, but in quiet. It started with cleaning gigs, part-time at first. A few nights at a fitness center to stay close to the sound of gloves hitting bags. Then full-time when the manager realized she never skipped a shift and wiped everything in clockwise circles like it mattered. She didn't need to be seen. She just needed to be near the ring. Even if no one knew her name anymore. Even if her name had once headlined the Cliffside Amateur Championship 3 years running. The irony that she now cleaned the same mats she once bled on wasn't lost on her. But she never commented. Never corrected anyone when they called her mop girl or janitor. There was freedom in invisibility. Until this morning. Until Eli Grant. Until the crowd. Until the marker ink dried on the whiteboard. Eli versus mop. 12:20. She hadn't worn wraps in nearly a year. But her hands remembered. Her fingers didn't fumble. The leather of the gloves, stiff with disuse, still curved along the knuckles like they belonged there. When she pulled them tight, something clicked, not in the gloves but in her. A lock disengaging. The gym had always split itself in two, the front and the back. The boutique and the basement. The smooth playlist and the rough mat. She moved through both worlds, but belonged in neither. Now she was stepping between them, and this time, everyone was watching. But they still didn't see her. Not really. They saw a woman in faded work pants. A janitor with crow's feet. They saw the costume, not the character. But inside, beneath the sweatshirt and calloused palms, she was rehearsing a rhythm she hadn't spoken aloud in years. The way her coach taught her, watch the hips, not the hands. Listen for breath, not words. Let your opponent write a story with their body, then tear out the ending. She waited while Eli bounced on the mat, playing to the phones. She watched him move. Too loose. Too confident. He dropped his right shoulder when he breathed out. His guard sagged when he laughed. She didn't smile. She didn't stretch. She watched. 3 minutes before the round was scheduled, she did something small, so small the crowd didn't even notice. She adjusted the wrist strap of her left glove and brushed her thumb along the edge twice. It was a habit, one born from hours of drill. The second brush meant ready. Her coach used to watch for that. He once told her, when you stop doing that, I'll know you're done. She had stopped brushing her thumb a year ago. Now it was back. The bell hadn't rung yet, but she was already in the fight. Meanwhile, Eli was still in the performance. You good, mop? He called out, grinning. Want me to go easy on the cleanup? More laughter. Someone clapped. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked across the gym, not at the people filming, not at Brandon the coach, but at the heavy bag in the back corner. The old one. The one with the duct tape wrapped around its base. Her initials were still faintly visible on the bottom in silver marker. LF. Someone had tried to scrub it off. They hadn't succeeded. She had hit that bag until the seams split, back when no one questioned her right to stand in the ring. She'd bled on that canvas and iced her ribs in that locker room. This was her ground long before the LED mirrors and protein shake stations came in. She didn't want revenge. She didn't need validation. But something else burned beneath her ribs. It wasn't anger. It was return. She stepped into the ring when Brandon called time. Not with a bounce or a swagger. She climbed between the ropes like someone crossing a threshold she already knew by heart. Her gloves hung low. Her jaw stayed loose. She rolled her shoulders once. No theatrics. No show. Just readiness. Someone cue the Rocky theme. A voice laughed from near the cardio machines. Eli laughed too. But something in his grin had started to flicker. She stood in the opposite corner, staring, not at Eli's face, but at his breathing. Short. Uneven. He was already too amped. He'd tire quick. The bell rang. She didn't move. He did. Big bounce. Wide stance. I'll play. You ready? He asked, half joking. Still no answer. He jabbed the air. Rolled his neck. Pivoted. Another jab. This time toward her chest. She slipped it. Not with effort. With memory. Her back foot drew a crescent on the canvas. Her shoulder dipped a centimeter. His glove caught nothing. She heard someone near the ropes laugh. She dodged it, but it wasn't surprise in their voice. It was novelty. They thought it was luck. Eli didn't. His grin narrowed. He stepped in faster, tried to cross. She wasn't there. Her feet danced the way ink curls on water, visible only if you're paying attention. No sound. No rush. Then came the comments. She's not throwing anything. She's just ducking. She doesn't know how to hit. But one man, clipboard trainer, quiet in the back, leaned forward. That's drilled, he muttered. That's drilled a long time. She let Eli tire himself for the first 30 seconds. He moved too wide. Too bold. His footwork played to the crowd. She played to gravity. Kept her center low. Chin down. Breath steady. On the 35th second, Eli launched a combo, jab, cross, hook. None landed. He passed air. She passed judgment. She had studied his rhythm now. He moved like a boxer who hadn't been hit in months. So she hit him. Not a showy punch. Not loud. Just fast. Sharp. A left hook low to the ribs. Tight arc flat fist. The kind of punch that doesn't echo, it sinks. Eli gasped. Folded. And everything else folded with him. The crowd. The jokes. The laughter. The phones. All sound collapsed into one moment of stunned silence. But this wasn't the punch that mattered most. That would come later. The real blow had already been dealt. It came not from her gloves, but from the fact she had answered a question no one asked her with a language no one expected her to speak. Power without noise. And still, she hadn't spoken a single word. The air in the gym hadn't quite recovered from the sound her glove made when it landed. It hadn't echoed because it didn't need to. It was the kind of punch that left behind silence, not applause. Eli was on his knees, face drained, one glove pressed weakly to his ribs. His breath came out in short, ragged pulses, and all the swagger that once clung to him like cologne had evaporated. Someone near the treadmills dropped their phone. The plastic hit the ground with a soft tap, but it might as well have been a gunshot in the stillness. The playlist on the front desk monitor was still playing, but no one noticed. The bass-heavy beats floated through the room like background noise to a scene that didn't need it. Brandon, the junior coach who had thought this whole thing was just a way to entertain the early crowd, stood frozen with one foot on the ring apron. His hand still held the clipboard, but it was slowly tilting downward, forgotten. She dropped him, someone whispered. With one punch. No one laughed this time. The woman who had live-streamed the sparring lowered her phone without looking at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. She didn't press it yet. She was still processing what she had seen. Lena didn't move to celebrate. She didn't lift her gloves or look at the cameras. Her body relaxed, and she stepped once to the side, giving the trainer space as he rushed toward Eli. The man crouched beside him, speaking in a low voice. Don't touch him yet, he said to Brandon without looking back. Give him a second. Eli wasn't talking. He was just breathing, shallow, uneven, the kind of breath that came not from effort, but from being hit somewhere that changed the rhythm of your body. His eyes were open but unfocused. His ego had been the first thing to drop, and now his body followed. Lena stood still, gloves at her sides, and looked neither triumphant nor apologetic. She simply waited, like this was something that was always going to happen. Because maybe it was. Maybe the moment Eli pointed at her with that half-laced glove, the rest had already been written. A few of the early morning regulars started backing away from the ring. One man who had laughed the loudest earlier now stood with his arms crossed, face pale. Another trainee leaned against the far wall, whispering something to no one in particular. Who is she? He said. What the hell just happened? Kyle, the front desk guy, didn't answer. He was too busy looking at the whiteboard where Eli versus Mop was still scrawled in thick black letters. He uncapped the marker again, hesitated, then slowly began wiping the board clean with the side of his hand. The ink smeared under his palm. It didn't come off all the way. Lena stepped back, crouched at the edge of the ring, and undid her gloves. Her fingers moved slowly, tugging at the Velcro, slipping her hands free one by one. She placed the gloves neatly beside her feet and began peeling off the wrist tape, the strips curling like faded petals. She had not said a single word since the beginning. She didn't have to. The message had been delivered, loud and clear, with zero dialogue. She picked up the gloves, walked toward her corner, and stepped out of the ring. No applause. No fanfare. Just silence. She passed Brandon without looking at him. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe a question, maybe an apology, but his lips didn't part. He stepped aside instinctively. She walked back to her cart, the one she had left parked near the vending machine. The mop handle still leaned where she had rested it, and the towel she'd used earlier was draped neatly over the side. She tied the sweatshirt tighter around her waist and adjusted the cart's handle. The squeaky wheel gave its familiar sound. The moment she touched it, everything felt like it had snapped back into place, like she was returning to a script everyone recognized. Only the script didn't fit anymore. They saw her differently now. But they didn't know what to do with that shift. The trainer with the clipboard, the older one, the quiet one, stepped closer to the ring and crouched at one corner. He ran his finger along the inside edge of the bottom rope, where a faint smudge of black marker still lingered. He rubbed at it. The ink was old but readable. A cursive script. L. Foster. No way, someone said behind him. The words were half breath, half disbelief. The trainer stood up, looked around the room, then turned toward the wall by the treadmill bay. Go look at the photo, he said, not loudly but firmly. The one from the old gym. Blue gloves, cracked mirror in the background. She's in the center row. A younger coach jogged over, eyes wide, scanning the framed photo beneath the overhead light. He stared for a long moment, then looked again. It's her, he said. Same eyes. Same stance. I remember that photo. Brandon turned back to the ring, face blank. His hands hung useless at his sides. He looked at Lena, now halfway down the corridor with her cart, and finally spoke. I didn't know, he said. I swear. A voice behind him replied. You didn't ask. Everyone turned. Coach Ben had just walked in. The wind from the open front door still lingered around the hem of his hoodie. His keys jingled in his hand. He took 3 steps forward and stopped, eyes on Lena. His expression wasn't shock. It was recognition. Deep. Measured. He nodded once. That's Lena Foster, he said to the room. Southpaw. Regional lightweight champ. 3 years straight. Trained on this mat before most of you ever touched a glove. He looked at Eli, still on the floor, being helped to his feet. Then he looked at Brandon. You let her spar the gym's loudest mouth for a joke? Brandon didn't respond. Ben's voice dropped lower, but heavier. She used to coach here. Before the renovations. Before the boutique mirrors and the branded water bottles. She's the reason we even have that ring. Lena didn't stop. She rolled her cart down the hallway, not faster, not slower. The towel on the side swung with each squeaky roll of the wheel. And the gym, once so loud, so smug, was now quiet in a way that made even the air feel ashamed. No one filmed anymore. No one cracked jokes. Even Kyle had stopped wiping the board. The smear of mop still ghosted under his hand. Lena reached the towel bin by the locker room door and emptied it like she always did. Folded the fresh stack, wiped down the lid, replaced the spray bottle. Routine, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Her gloves hung now beside the radiator. A small drip of sweat still clung to the leather. No one dared move them. No one dared touch them. She had answered the challenge with precision. With legacy. With truth. And in a gym full of people trained to throw punches, she had landed the only one that mattered. By the next morning, the gym opened on time. But everything inside felt off kilter, like a song still playing after the dance had ended. The playlist was turned lower than usual, just soft enough to be ignored, just loud enough to cover the silence. People filtered in, same routines, same stretches, same towels over shoulders, but they moved differently now, as if something sacred had happened and no one had figured out how to talk about it. Some avoided the ring altogether, stepping around it like it was a shrine. Others lingered near it longer than necessary, peering at the floor, pretending to look for chalk marks while really trying to imagine how a woman they'd overlooked for months had dropped a rising star in seconds. Nobody said her name, not out loud. It felt like saying it would make it real, would force them to acknowledge they'd all missed something. Or worse, ignored it. Near the vending machines, someone had printed a single sheet of paper and taped it to the wall above the lockers. Black text. No image. It read, she didn't say a word. We heard her anyway. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. People knew. Or thought they did. Lena didn't return that day. Her cart wasn't in its usual corner. The hallway felt longer, without the gentle squeak of her wheels marking the hours. No badge clicked against the mop handle. No towel folds waited precisely arranged. But her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. Kyle, the front desk attendant, erased the whiteboard early, scrubbing harder than necessary. He didn't add new names. The space where Eli versus Mop had once been stayed empty, like an apology no one wanted to speak aloud. Eli didn't show up either. Word had spread that he was taking a personal recovery day, though no one could confirm whether that meant his ribs, his pride, or both. Brandon, the junior coach, tried to carry on like nothing had changed. But the way he barked out instructions was flatter now, quieter. His confidence wasn't gone, just muted. Every time he passed the ring, he glanced at it, like he expected something, or someone, to be waiting. Tony, the older coach, moved through the gym slowly that morning. His usual rounds were quiet, but attentive. He paused at the ring's edge for a long time, staring at the floor. Then he walked over to the wall of old photos, black and white shots framed in fading silver, scanning faces from 10, 15 years ago. His fingers landed on the edge of one frame, where a younger Lena stood in the middle of a group, gloves slung over her shoulder, sweat matting her hair, and a defiant half-smile carved across her face. She didn't look victorious. She looked hungry, focused, unshakable. It was the same look she had when she stood over Eli, saying nothing. Tony stepped back and left the frame as it was. No dusting, no cleaning, just acknowledgement. In the locker hallway, a few trainees whispered, retelling the story like it had happened a decade ago, adding flair with each version. She didn't even blink, one said. Like she was waiting for that punch her whole life. Did you see how she moved? Not like someone lucky. Like someone trained. Someone sharp. That wasn't luck. That was a read. That was years of experience stuffed into silence. One kid, maybe 17, still new to the gym, lingered by the gloves wall, staring at his own reflection. He picked up a pair of beginner wraps, but didn't put them on. Instead, he watched the spot on the floor where Lena had unwrapped her gloves, where the tape had curled like dry leaves beside her shoes. She was invisible until she wasn't, he muttered to himself. What else are we not seeing? The question hung there, unanswered. In the days that followed, the gym adjusted. Subtly, quietly, people who used to bark at front desk staff began saying good morning. Members who hogged equipment started asking, "You using this?" The mop bucket got replaced with a new one, even though no one could bring themselves to move the old one from where it stood behind the lockers. It stayed there like a monument. On the fourth day, Lena returned. Not during peak hours. Early, before the sky cracked open. Before the first treadmill beeped. The only sound in the building was the quiet clink of her ID badge as she pushed the cart down the hall. The lights flickered on automatically as she passed, one by one, casting long shadows across the gym floor. She didn't stop by the ring. She didn't look at the whiteboard. She walked straight to the back, where the older towels were stored, and started her route like she always had. The few people who saw her that morning said nothing. They nodded. She nodded back. That was all. Kyle offered her a bottle of water when she passed the front desk. She accepted it, but didn't drink. Just held it in her left hand as she wiped down the vending machine glass. Near the lockers, a flyer advertising a lightweight challenge who's brave enough had been quietly taken down. In its place, someone had pinned a new sheet. Be respectful. You never know who's watching. No one admitted to putting it up. No one took it down. Lena continued her rounds. When she reached the ring, she paused. Not long. Just a beat. Enough to breathe in the faint scent of chalk and leather. Enough to remember. Then she moved on. The clipboard trainer, whose name no one ever remembered but whose eyes missed nothing, watched her from the corner. He didn't speak. He simply wrote something down in the margin of his notepad. LF, tempo. Balanced. Eyes on chest. That was all. It wasn't a comment. It was a reminder. A truth. Days passed. Then weeks. The gym didn't forget. It couldn't. Because Lena didn't become a ghost after that. She became a presence. Not louder. Just heavier. Her silence now carried weight, and when she cleaned the ring, no one made jokes. They watched. They moved aside. They offered space. Not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it in the most unforgettable way. And even though she never asked for their acknowledgement, they gave it in the smallest gestures. A folded towel handed to her without being requested. A trainee adjusting the angle of a bag so she could clean beneath it. Brandon, the junior coach, started arriving early, often staying near the ring with a notebook in hand, watching her movements, not to correct, but to learn. One morning, after she had finished wiping the bench rack, he approached. Coach Ben said you taught him footwork years ago, he said awkwardly. That true? Lena didn't answer immediately. She looked at him for a second, as if measuring the question, then nodded once. Brandon cleared his throat. Think you'd ever, maybe, show me what you showed him? She looked down at her cart, then at the ring, then back at him. Start with your left foot, she said quietly. If your left is lost, your body will follow. Then she walked away, leaving him standing there, scribbling the words down like gospel. The gym didn't speak of her like a myth anymore. Myths are distant, untouchable. She was here, real. And though she still didn't talk much, her presence rewrote the rules. Not through punishment, through example, through proof, through one moment of precision that echoed louder than any shout ever could. It was on the 10th morning after the match that everything changed again, not with another punch, but with a question. A quiet one, spoken not by a coach or a trainee, but by a girl no older than 16. She had started coming in on weekends, mostly to watch her older brother train. She never stepped near the ring, just sat by the lockers with a book in hand and earbuds dangling from her hoodie. But that morning, as Lena was wiping down the mirrors near the squat racks, the girl stood and walked over. No hesitation, no bravado. Just sincerity. Is it true? She asked. Lena glanced at her reflection in the mirror before turning. That you used to be a champ? The mop paused. Not completely, just for a breath. Then Lena nodded once. The girl didn't squeal or ask for proof. She simply said, "That's cool," and returned to her bench. That small moment rippled outward. Later that afternoon, 2 other trainees, ones who had been present during the Eli incident, approached Lena near the vending machines. One held a pair of gloves in his hands, still wrapped in the original plastic. "If I get these wrong," he said, "will you tell me?" Lena looked at the gloves, then at the boy's posture. His stance was too wide, too stiff. She didn't say anything at first, just reached out, took the gloves, flipped them over, and said, "These are too big for your hands. You'll overcompensate and drop your guard. Try a size down." He blinked, then smiled. "Thanks." It wasn't official. No one handed Lena a clipboard or added her to the staff list. But the gym began shifting around her like planets around gravity. Not forcefully, just naturally. And though she never led a class, the most serious trainees began mirroring her movements. Her foot placement, the way she wrapped her wrists with minimal tape. They started warming up how she cleaned, slow circles, clockwise, controlled. Coach Ben noticed. Of course he did. One afternoon he lingered near the front desk longer than usual, pretending to refill his coffee while watching Lena restack the free weights. Then he turned to Kyle and asked, "How many complaints has Lena had since she started?" Kyle didn't look up from the computer. "None. Ever." "And how many times have people asked about her in the last 2 weeks?" "Every day. I had to start a spreadsheet." Ben nodded slowly. "She still hasn't asked for anything, right? Not a raise. Not hours. Not even new gloves." "Good," Ben said. "Because we're not giving her anything. Unless she asks. Let them come to her." And they did. A week later, a small group gathered around Lena near the ring. 3 girls, 2 guys, all under 20, each carrying notebooks. They didn't interrupt. They just waited until she finished sanitizing the corner pads. Then one asked, "What's the first thing to learn if you want to spar?" Lena didn't look up. She just replied, "How to lose without flinching." That became the start of something unofficial. Every Tuesday and Thursday, around 4:45 p.m., Lena would pause her route near the back corner of the gym. If someone had a question, she answered it. If they didn't, she kept moving. There were no lectures, no demonstrations. But the way she spoke was surgical, precise words that cut through nonsense and ego. When someone asked how to throw a cleaner jab, she said, "Don't focus on speed. Focus on what happens the second after your glove returns. That's when people get hit." When another asked how she knew Eli's ribs were open, she said, "He made a joke, and when people laugh, they breathe with their stomach." That's where he left the door. The younger trainees started calling that space Lena's corner. Coaches stopped correcting them. Even Brandon, who once laughed the loudest, now showed up 5 minutes early just to lean against the ropes and listen. One afternoon, during a particularly packed evening session, the power flickered. The LED panels over the front lobby dimmed. The smoothie fridge buzzed, then went quiet. Only the emergency lights stayed on. People paused, checking their phones for signal. Kyle swore under his breath at the desk. And Lena? She kept moving. She retrieved a flashlight from her cart, handed it to the front counter, and continued mopping with perfect rhythm. In the flickering glow of emergency light, the ring looked older, more real. Like the days before renovations. The regulars fell silent. A few gathered near the back wall, where the old gym photo still hung. No one spoke for a minute. Then someone near the heavy bag said quietly, "This is how it used to feel, isn't it? No mirrors. No playlist. No performance. Just space, sweat, and silence." A few people nodded. The youngest among them turned toward Lena, who was now spraying down the ropes. "Did it look like this when you fought?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Exactly like this. Except the floor creaked more." That night, Ben had maintenance replace the front lights, but left the back half of the gym dimmer than before. When someone asked why, he shrugged. "Ambience," he said. "Focuses people on the ring." But everyone knew it was something else. Something about honoring what Lena had brought back. That this gym had once been about craft, not cosmetics. That victory wasn't about how loud you were, but how quiet you could be when it mattered. As the weeks stretched on, the impact deepened. The younger fighters trained harder, not because anyone yelled, but because they felt watched. Not judged, but measured. Not by Lena's words, but by her presence. The few who couldn't take it faded out. The ones who stayed got better. Sharper. More aware. People began taking off their headphones more. They spoke to each other. Spotted each other. Cleaned up after themselves. And Lena? She never changed. She still showed up before dawn. Still left before sunset. Still wore the same sweatshirt, same work pants, same flat shoes with the worn soles. But now, when she passed the ring, people moved. Not out of fear. Out of respect. And in her wake, the silence she left behind wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken, powerful, and quietly revolutionary. It wasn't a scheduled class. There were no posters, no sign-up sheets, no glossy promotions promising transformation in 8 weeks. But by the start of the 3rd month since the spar, every Thursday evening the same circle of bodies gathered near the ring, hands taped, gloves hanging loose around their necks, eyes trained not on a screen or mirror, but on a woman with a mop handle resting against her cart and a silence so complete it made every word she eventually spoke feel like scripture. Lena didn't lead these sessions. She barely spoke at all. She simply did what she had always done, showed up, worked in quiet, and listened. But every now and then, when someone asked the right question or made the wrong assumption, she would pause and offer a correction, so cutting in its simplicity, it carved through noise like a blade. One Thursday, a tall kid named Marcus, new eager, all muscle and no control, asked, "How do I hit like you did?" Lena, who was stacking fresh towels into the ringside bin, replied without turning, "Why do you want to?" The others around him chuckled nervously, assuming it was a joke. But Marcus swallowed, blinked, and shrugged. "To win, I guess." Lena stood, straightened her back, and looked at him for a long time. "If your goal is just to hit," she said, "you'll always miss the point. Learn to see first. Then to think. Then to wait. The punch comes last." That moment marked a shift. Not just in Marcus, who became quieter, more focused, but in everyone around him. The sessions changed after that. People started journaling between rounds. Not for content. For reflection. A week later, one of the girls, Sienna, small, fast, sharp-eyed, started showing up early to clean the pads before her drills. She never said why. But Lena nodded once the first time she saw it, and that was enough to make it stick. Other changes crept in too. Tony, the elder coach, began spending more time in Lena's orbit. Not in conversation, just presence. He started shifting the sparring schedule so that her cleaning routes never overlapped with high-traffic distractions. Brandon, slowly and awkwardly, resumed asking questions. Never directly. He'd toss them into the air like suggestions and hope they landed somewhere useful. One afternoon, while Lena was refilling a spray bottle near the locker hallway, he hovered nearby and said, "I've been trying to teach this one kid pivot footwork. Nothing sticks. What did your coach used to say about that?" Lena, without looking up, replied, "Don't teach him the pivot. Teach him to feel the floor under his toes. The foot will follow the feeling." Brandon nodded like he'd just heard something ancient. He wrote it down later on a post-it and taped it to his own clipboard. Feel the floor. It became something of a phrase in the gym, passed from mouth to mouth, repeated during drills, shouted half-serious during warm-ups. It wasn't just instruction, it was philosophy. Feel the floor. Respect the silence. Watch first, move second. Lena had never meant to teach. But she had never stopped being a coach. Her way was different now. Less hands-on, more gravitational. And the effect was undeniable. But not everyone welcomed it. There were murmurs. Always are. A handful of older members, the ones who had come for the luxury, the boutique culture, the influencer aesthetic, started whispering about how things were getting weird. One man, mid-30s, overly tan with pristine gloves he never actually sweated in, complained to Kyle at the front desk. "This place used to be cool. Now it's like church." Kyle just smiled politely and said, "The floors have never been cleaner." The tension stayed low mostly, until a Thursday evening when a corporate representative from Cliffside's franchise headquarters showed up unannounced. Her name was Natalie, sharp blazer, sharper tone, and a clipboard filled with branding checklists. She circled the gym like a cat eyeing furniture she didn't approve of. She spoke to Ben, briefly, then to Brandon, longer. Then she pulled Kyle aside and said, "Who's the cleaning woman everyone's whispering about?" Kyle blinked. "You mean Lena? That's her name." Natalie glanced at her clipboard, then back at Lena, who was wiping down the mirror beside the weight rack with unhurried grace. "She's not on any promotional material. Why is she running informal coaching sessions?" Kyle hesitated. "She's not running anything. People just follow her." "That's not regulation," Natalie snapped. "You can't have unlisted staff influencing training protocols." "What's her certification?" Kyle didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because the question missed the point so entirely it didn't deserve one. That evening, Natalie approached Lena directly. "Hi, I'm Natalie from HQ. You're Lena, correct?" Lena turned from the cart, nodded once. "There's been some concern about you stepping outside your designated role," Natalie continued. "We appreciate initiative, but it's important that everyone stays in their lane. You understand?" Lena looked at her, eyes still and unreadable. Then she said, "What lane is that?" Natalie paused, blinking. "Well, janitorial staff. Don't speak." Lena asked. Not confrontational. Just curious. "Don't think." Natalie shifted her weight. "No, of course not. I mean, we value everyone's role here, but training advice should be left to certified professionals." Lena looked around the room, at the young fighters still shadowboxing in silence, at the trainees taking notes, at the coaches who now watched from a respectful distance. Then she said, Advice wasn't asked. It was given freely. Like sweat. Like breath. Natalie didn't quite know what to do with that. She left before the end of the hour, muttering something about follow-up meetings. The next morning, Coach Ben walked into the gym, glanced at Lena, already polishing the dumbbell rack, and said only, "Keep doing what you're doing." And that was that. The unspoken lines had been drawn. Not by protest. Not by drama. But by clarity. Lena's authority didn't come from a title. It came from truth. From proof. From a moment in the ring that rewrote every assumption in real time. The gym adapted around that truth. Not overnight. But steadily. They built a board on the wall near the old photo display. Coach notes. Every week, someone would anonymously pin a quote from Lena. Not always things she meant as teachings. Just things she'd said. Breathe before you speak. Then ask if it still needs saying. There's more power in posture than in punching. You're not tired. You're unfocused. No one claimed authorship. But everyone read them. And slowly, Lena's name stopped being whispered. It started being said plainly. With respect. With weight. Lena. Coach. Mentor. Champion. Or simply, the one who saw everything before she acted. And never needed noise to prove she belonged. It began with a glove. Not the usual pair Lena wore tucked into the side pocket of her cart, worn and faded with time. This one was new. Glossy leather, still stiff at the seams, deep navy with silver stitching. It had no label, no brand name, just a single initial embroidered on the wrist, L. No one knew who left it. It appeared one morning, placed carefully at the base of the ring like an offering. Lena noticed it immediately when she arrived. She paused, staring at it for a long moment, then gently picked it up and turned it in her hands. Her fingers pressed along the seams, the padding, the stitching. She didn't smile. But she didn't put it down either. She simply walked back to her cart and rested it on top of a clean towel, where it remained the rest of the day, unspoken, untouched, acknowledged. That glove became a symbol. Not flashy, not loud, just present, the way Lena had always been. Over the next few days, subtle things began happening. The new recruits started referring to her as coach, without asking permission. Not in a mocking way. Not like Eli once had, but with reverence. Brandon, still awkward but earnest, began scheduling his footwork drills around when Lena was expected to be cleaning nearby. He never said it out loud, but he hoped she might drop another small piece of wisdom as casually as she wiped down a bench. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she didn't. That was part of the learning. She taught only when people were quiet enough to deserve it. One afternoon, a documentary film crew, small, local, nothing major, came to Cliffside to record a promo for the franchise. The corporate office had sent them. They wanted shots of the new LED-lit mirrors, the boutique locker rooms, the influencer-friendly lighting. But during one of the takes, while filming a staged sparring session in the main ring, the director caught Lena walking silently past in the background, pushing her cart, one hand on the mop, the other adjusting a folded stack of towels. Something about that frame, the quiet posture, the poise, the control, stuck with him. He asked who she was. Kyle said simply, "That's Lena. She's the reason we're all still trying." The director asked if she'd mind being interviewed. Lena declined, gently but firmly. "Stories told right don't need words," she said. So instead of filming her face, they filmed her hands. Her hands wrapping a trainee's wrist. Her hands folding gloves. Her hands tying off the trash bag in the corner as she passed two kids trading jabs by the mirror. When the short documentary went live a month later, the part with Lena lasted just 13 seconds. No dialogue. Just a slow pan across her cleaning the ring, then the camera catching a trainee watching her from a distance with quiet awe. That clip was what went viral. Not the branded shake bar. Not the LED mirrors. Just the silence of power being lived, not performed. And that's when something truly unexpected happened. The gym started getting letters. Emails. Messages. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. From people who had once been overlooked. Cleaners. Night shift workers. Former athletes. Retired coaches. Veterans. Daughters of janitors. Sons of fighters. They wrote about Lena like she was someone they'd known their whole lives. Someone who reminded them that dignity didn't always wear gold belts. That mastery didn't shout. That there was a kind of greatness that chose not to be seen until it had to be. Ben printed the messages and pinned some of them to the back wall near the old photos. He didn't make an announcement. He just let the words sit there. And people read them. Quietly. Some smiled. Some blinked harder than usual. Lena never commented. She simply began arriving earlier. Not to teach. Not to lead. But to clean more space. To create room. One morning, as she passed Tony by the medicine ball rack, he stopped her. "You know," he said, "people are calling this place the House of Quiet now." She raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" "It is," he replied. "Means we finally shut up long enough to listen." She gave him the smallest of nods and kept moving. That same afternoon, the whiteboard near the lockers, once covered in sparring matchups and smoothie specials, featured just one line, written in capital letters. The gym speaks quieter now. Everyone hears more. By now, Lena's lessons were being quoted in other gyms, shared on forums, folded into training manuals. But she hadn't published anything, hadn't posed for a single photo. Her only contribution was consistency, presence, integrity. And still she said little. It was a Tuesday evening when something unexpected happened. Eli returned. Not swaggering, not laughing, just present. He entered through the back entrance, hoodie pulled low, gym bag slung over one shoulder. A few people noticed. Whispers started. Brandon stiffened. Kyle narrowed his eyes. But Lena didn't react. She was by the glove rack, restacking wraps that had been left unfolded. Eli approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Lena didn't look up. "You just did," she replied. He waited a beat, then continued. "I was stupid. I treated you like nothing. I don't know what I thought, but I know what I saw." She didn't interrupt. "You didn't just beat me," he added. "You made me realize I wasn't even in the ring to begin with. Just playing. Pretending." Lena straightened a final wrap, then turned to him. "And now I want to learn," he said. "For real. No cameras. No jokes. Just learn." She studied him. Not his words, but the way he stood. The tension in his jaw. The guilt buried in his posture. "Then start with silence," she said. "And clean the ring." He looked confused. She nodded toward the mop. "Earn your place the way you tried to take mine." Eli stared at the handle, then nodded slowly. He picked it up and began to clean. No one laughed. No one filmed. No one mocked. They simply watched. And Lena moved on to the next station, saying nothing. That night, someone wrote on the coach board, "The strongest punch isn't a fist. It's the truth you can stand inside." And beneath it, smaller, in different handwriting, "Start with silence. Clean the ring." The gym was quieter now, not silent, not hollow, but grounded. Conversations still happened, laughter still echoed off the heavy bags, and the water fountain still squeaked when turned too fast, but everything moved with more weight, more presence. People noticed each other now. The weights weren't dropped with arrogance, but placed down with care. New members were greeted. Old ones were respected. And Lena remained exactly as she had been, present, precise, and invisible only to those unwilling to see. On the wall near the entrance, someone had tacked up a fresh black and white photo. It showed Lena from behind, walking across the ring after the day she floored Eli. Her gloves hung at her sides, and her head was tilted slightly downward. The caption beneath it, handwritten in silver ink, read, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard." No one confessed to putting it up. No one took it down. And every morning, Lena passed it without a glance, as though the image had never been taken. She didn't need reminders. She had lived every frame. But something in the air was changing again. Not in a way that people could articulate. It was a shift you felt more than saw, like a pressure drop before a storm, or the way time slows just before an echo. People lingered longer after class. They sparred with more intention, not just power. The young ones who used to train for clips now trained for craft. And more often than not, when they had a question, they waited for Lena to pass near their station, and asked it in a tone softer than their punches. One Thursday evening, Brandon approached Coach Ben with an idea. "We should name the ring," he said. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because people are already calling it hers. We should make it real." Ben stared at him a long moment. "You're serious?" Brandon nodded. "You want to make it a monument?" Ben asked. "No," Brandon replied. "A mirror." The idea caught on quietly. There were no grand announcements. No banners. No balloons. Just a slow build. The corner pads were swapped out for new ones in navy blue, the same color as Lena's old gloves. The ropes were retaped. Clean, tight, seamless. A small brass plaque was fixed to the far post, where sweat lines faded into canvas. It read, "The Foster Circle, where silence teaches and every step matters." Lena didn't comment the first time she saw it. She simply walked to her cart, took out a fresh towel, and began wiping down the ropes as she always had. But when she reached the plaque, she paused. One hand touched the edge of the brass, briefly, as though testing whether it was warm. Then she moved on. That night, she didn't go home right after her shift. Instead, she sat on the edge of the ring when the last light dimmed, legs dangling over the side, the mop handle resting beside her. Tony passed by and noticed. He didn't interrupt. He just walked slower. But Lena spoke first. "I used to think silence was the prize," she said. "That if I could stay quiet enough, invisible enough, I'd never be taken from anything again." Tony nodded, listening. "But it turns out," she continued, "silence is the teacher. It makes people lean in." Tony leaned against the pillar. "And now they're listening." "Maybe," she said. "But what they do after listening, that's the part that matters." Over the next few weeks, trainees began adding something to their routines. Not required. Not coached. Just shared. Before stepping into the ring, they'd pause for 3 seconds. Eyes closed. Feet grounded. A breath in. A breath out. Then they'd begin. Lena never told them to do that, but they had watched her, and she always moved like every breath counted. That habit became ritual, and rituals became culture. Cliffside's reputation began to grow beyond the city. Not for its amenities, not for its branding, but for its discipline. For the odd rumor that there was a gym where the janitor taught more than the coaches, and where the first thing you learned wasn't how to hit, but how to watch. A coach from another franchise called one day and asked if Lena offered clinics. Kyle laughed. She doesn't even use email, he said. You want to learn from her? Show up early, stay late, and sweep the mats. Then came the letter. Handwritten. No return address. The envelope was unassuming, tucked under the gym's front door one rainy morning. Kyle opened it, then handed it to Coach Ben, who read it in silence. It was from Lena's old trainer, the man who had first taught her the rhythm of breathing between jabs, the way to hold your hands as if they were questions instead of threats. The letter didn't ask for recognition. It only said, I watched the clip. I saw the room fall still after she moved. She was always going to be the quietest in the room. I just never expected the world to listen. Tell her, she finished the work I started. Ben folded the letter and placed it in the office drawer, where only Lena's file lived. He didn't mention it to her. He knew he didn't have to. One day, she would find it on her own. On a particularly humid Friday, Lena arrived to find the gym more packed than usual. New faces. Curious ones. A few camera crews outside. Apparently, some influencer had tweeted about the cleaning woman who knocked out a champ and rebuilt a gym in silence. She looked at the crowd, then at her cart, and without a word began her routine. But something was different. As she passed the main hallway, every person stepped aside. Not out of politeness. Out of understanding. She wasn't just clearing space. She was creating it. For them. For what came next. That afternoon Eli, who now came in 3 times a week and trained without mirrors, stepped into the ring, not to spar but to speak. His voice, once sharp and mocking, now low and measured. I've said it before, but I'll say it louder this time, he began. I didn't lose a fight that day. I lost the part of me that thought strength was noise. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The room was still. He looked at Lena, standing just beyond the ropes. You didn't just clean this gym. You cleaned us. Stripped us of ego. Scrubbed us down to what mattered. And when the light hit again, we could see each other clearly. Lena said nothing. But her eyes softened. Just a flicker. Then she turned back to her cart, wrapped the towel around the mop head, and pushed it forward. That night, after the gym emptied, she sat once more on the edge of the ring. Not alone this time. Sienna sat beside her. Then Marcus. Then Brandon. One by one. No one spoke. They didn't need to. They had learned the lesson. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. And so she sat, not as the woman they once mocked, but as the gravity that held them together. The foundation. The silence beneath the roar. The story they would all carry. The story they had become a part of. And long after she was gone, long after her cart was wheeled out one final time, that ring would remain. Not just as a place to fight, but as the quietest space in the world. Where truth didn't shout. It stood.